The cold wind of North Dakota cut across the Badlands like a blade, carrying the kind of silence that warned people to stay inside. But on this night, a woman was tied to an old cottonwood tree, shaking from cold, her wrists bleeding, her voice too weak to scream anymore. Her name was Susan Thornton, the last owner of Cottonwood Creek Ranch, and she believed she was going to die out here. But long before she ended up strapped to that tree, her trouble had already begun. That morning started like every other hard day on the ranch. Susan drove her beat-up flatbed truck along the dirt road, fighting the wind that shoved the truck sideways. The Badlands weren't just land to her. They were an enemy that never stopped pushing. At 28, Susan was strong, smarter than most men she had ever met, and stubborn enough to run a ranch alone. But the ranch was falling apart. Her father had left her a legacy, but along with it came debts so heavy she felt it every time she woke up. Her only hope now was Sunfire, her golden Palomino mare. Sunfire was perfect, beautiful, and the last pride of the Thornton bloodline. The Dakota Breeders' auction was the next morning. Selling Sunfire would hurt, but it might be the only way to save the ranch from foreclosure. Susan stepped out of the truck and looked across the pasture. Sunfire stood in the fading light like a treasure painted in gold. The mare lifted her head when she saw her, soft eyes glowing with trust. Susan touched the fence and let out a slow breath. "This is it, girl," she whispered. "Tomorrow you save the ranch." But trouble didn't come only from debt. Trouble came with a slick smile and a brand new black pickup truck. Andrew Macy. His ranch sat on the east side, a massive corporate spread that swallowed smaller ranches whole. He had been circling Susan like a wolf, waiting for her to fall. His voice was smooth, his boots shiny, and his sympathy fake. Every time he spoke, she felt trapped, as if he were already dragging her land into his empire. And beside him, always silent, always watching, was Marcus Grit Ryland, a wide-shouldered foreman with dead eyes and a dangerous stillness. He handled animals like they were objects, not living creatures. Susan kept her distance from both men. Something inside her warned that if she ever let them get close, they would take everything she had left. But the Badlands held more than greedy men. They held a legend. Cypher, a massive, jet-black wild stallion who ruled the ridges like a king. Locals whispered about him. Some said he was a phantom. Some said he was cursed. But everyone agreed he was smart. Too smart. He broke fences, lured mares away, and always vanished before anyone could catch him. Susan and Cypher had been battling for months. She chased him off her land. He pushed her fences to test her. She respected him but feared the trouble he brought. And now, Sunfire was grazing near Cypher's territory. One mistake could cost her everything. The mistake came with a ping on her phone. A motion camera from the northern pasture showed a fence cut clean through. Not bent, not pushed. Cut. And in the background, a dark shape moving toward the canyon. Cypher. Fear hit her like a punch. That pasture was where Sunfire had been moved. If the stallion got to her, if Sunfire ran into the Badlands, she'd be gone forever. The ranch would fall with her. Susan didn't waste a second. She grabbed her tools, her father's old, 38, and saddled Sunfire. The sky was turning orange with sunset as she rode north, wind slapping her face, heart pounding with dread. She reached the old cottonwood tree that marked the broken fence line. It stood alone, bent with age, its branches creaking like bones. The wire was snapped clean. It was wrong. Cypher didn't do this. Cypher pushed fences. He didn't cut them. She jumped off Sunfire and tied the mare to a low branch. The pasture was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that made her skin crawl. She started working fast, pulling wire tight, breathing hard, her mind racing with fear and pressure. But she wasn't alone. Hoofbeats approached, slow, steady, confident. She froze. Those steps didn't belong to Sunfire. Susan turned, and her heart dropped. Two riders came over the ridge, Andrew Macy in a spotless western coat. Grit Ryland behind him, silent as a shadow. Her stomach twisted. This was no accident. This was a trap. "Evening, Susan," Macy said, smiling like he was greeting an old friend. She didn't answer. Her hand moved toward her hip where the gun rested, but she didn't get far. Grit was off his horse before she could blink. His hand grabbed her arm, strong as iron. She fought, swinging wild, but he barely flinched. Grit's fist slammed into the side of her head. The world spun. Her knees buckled. She tasted blood. Before she could recover, he shoved her against the cottonwood. She felt rope wrapping around her wrists. She struggled, but his strength was inhuman. He pulled the lariat tight, the bark scraping her skin raw. Susan's breath turned into a sharp gasp. She was tied, pinned, helpless. Macy walked to Sunfire, stroking the mare's neck like she already belonged to him. "She's mine now," he said. "Andrew," Susan begged, "please, you can't." But he only smiled, took Sunfire's lead rope, and turned away. "We'll say you sold her to me," he said coldly. "People will believe that. And as for you, people get lost out here all the time." Then he rode away, taking Sunfire with him. The wind fell silent. And Susan was alone in the growing darkness, tied to a tree in the Badlands, freezing, bleeding, and terrified. Hours passed. Her screams faded into the night. Coyotes circled. Her strength slipped away, and when she finally lost all hope, when her mind began to drift into darkness, a shape appeared on the ridge, massive, black, silent. The wild stallion. Cypher. And he was walking straight toward her. Cypher stood on the ridge like a shadow pulled from the night sky. His black coat caught the weak moonlight, turning him into something unreal. Something powerful. Something wild. Susan blinked through the blur of cold and tears. At first she thought she was dreaming. Her body was shutting down, drifting toward sleep, the kind you never wake up from. But then Cypher moved. Slow, silent, purposeful. His hooves crunched softly on the frozen ground as he walked down toward her. The coyotes that had been creeping closer vanished into the darkness as if chased by a ghost. When the stallion reached her, he let out a sharp snort. His breath puffed in the freezing air like smoke. His ears pinned back, not in anger at her, but at the smell around her. Fear, blood, human danger. He sniffed her sleeve, her cheek, the rope biting into her wrists. Susan tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Cypher!" He stopped. His dark eyes locked onto her face. Susan didn't know if he understood his name or her fear, but he understood something. Something human. Something urgent. Then he moved. Cypher dropped his head and nudged her shoulder hard enough to rock her against the tree. She winced, thinking he might attack. But his huge teeth didn't go for her. They went for the rope. He bit down and pulled. Hard. The rope jerked. Pain shot through her arms. She gasped, biting back a cry. Cypher didn't stop. He clamped his jaws onto the lariat again and ripped at it with the full power of his neck and shoulders. The rough rope shredded strand by strand. He worked fast, almost frantic, snorting with every pull. Susan felt every jerk shake her body. She felt the fibers snap one by one. Her wrists burned. Her shoulders throbbed. She didn't care. This wild horse, the same horse she had chased off her land, was fighting for her. With a final violent snap of his head, the last strand broke. The rope fell. And Susan collapsed forward, hitting the cold dirt. She was free, but too numb to move. Her hands throbbed in sharp, stabbing waves, blood trickling down her arms. Cypher nudged her again, more urgently this time. She tried to push herself up, but her legs didn't respond. The cold had sunk deep into her bones. She was close to the point where the body stops shivering, the dangerous edge of hypothermia. "Please," she whispered. Cypher nudged her harder. Then again, pushing. forcing her, ordering her, move. Somehow she got her knees under her. She stood, stumbled, fell. Cypher stepped beside her, blocking her fall with his massive shoulder. He didn't let her drop again. He angled himself so she was pressed against his warm body. He guided her like a shepherd driving a weak lamb, pushing her in the direction of the distant ranch lights. Every step felt like climbing a mountain with broken bones. Her boots dragged. The world tilted. Her breath came in short, painful bursts. But Cypher kept her moving. When coyotes yipped nearby, he swung around, placing his body between her and the sound. His ears laid flat, his muscles tensed. He stomped the ground once, warning anything nearby that he was ready to fight. And the coyotes scattered. Susan leaned on him again, crying quietly from pain and cold. "Thank you. Just don't leave me." He didn't. The long night felt endless. The sky stayed black. The wind cut her face. Every few steps she stumbled, but Cypher would nudge her forward, refusing to let her fall again. His warmth kept her from freezing. His instincts kept her alive. When dawn finally broke, Susan wasn't sure if she was awake or dreaming. The pale gray light slowly revealed the shape of her own ranch ahead. Ben, her ranch hand, stepped out of the bunkhouse, holding a cup of coffee. The cup fell from his hand, shattering on the ground when he saw her. "Susan, what happened?" She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a broken whisper. She pointed toward the ridge. Ben followed her trembling hand. There, standing tall on the ridge, was Cypher. Black. Silent. Watching. As Ben rushed to Susan and wrapped his coat around her, the stallion let out a low whinny. Then, with one strong toss of his head, he turned and disappeared back into the canyons, like a shadow melting into the land. "He saved me." Susan whispered before her knees buckled. Ben caught her just in time. They brought her inside, wrapped her in blankets, and tried to warm her hands. But Susan's mind was already racing. The cut fence, Macy's smug face, Grit's brutal hands, her stolen mare, Cypher's brand. The truth hit her with the force of a hammer. Macy wasn't after Sunfire alone. He had been hunting Cypher, a wild stallion worth millions, and he had left her to die so he could take them both. Once her strength returned enough to hold a phone, she called Sheriff Brody. He didn't believe her at first. Macy was a wealthy, respected man, but when Susan spoke one name, Xanadu Cross, the sheriff went silent. "You're saying Cypher is the lost stallion? The real one?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling, "and Macy knows." From that moment on, everything changed. Sheriff Brody promised to meet her at the Dakota Breeders' Auction, the place Macy would try to sell Sunfire before anyone could prove she was stolen. Susan refused to rest. She refused to pretend she wasn't hurting. She wrapped her wrists, pulled on her father's old jacket, and climbed into Ben's truck. "We're getting her back," she said, voice cold with fury. 3 hours later, she stepped through the auction doors. The noisy hall fell silent. People stared at her bruises, her torn clothes, her swollen wrists. She didn't stop. She walked straight toward the stage, just as Sunfire was led under the bright lights. Macy turned. Their eyes met, and his face drained of color. He thought she was dead. He had planned it that way. But Susan Thornton had survived. And she was not done fighting. The auction hall buzzed with voices, money, and tension. Breeders from across the country filled the rows of seats, watching the parade of horses under the bright lights. But everything stopped the moment Susan walked in. Her face was bruised. Her wrists were wrapped in rough bandages. Her clothes were dusty and torn from a night fighting for her life in the cold. She looked like someone who had crawled back from the edge of death. People turned. Whispers shot through the crowd. And on the other side of the arena stood Andrew Macy, clean-shaven, calm, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly ranch bills. He was laughing with a group of buyers until his eyes landed on Susan. He froze. His face shifted from surprise to fear, then to pure anger. He had expected her to be dead out there in the Badlands. Before he could move, a handler led Sunfire into the ring. Her golden coat shone under the hot lights. Her ears flicked nervously, but her eyes searched the crowd. The moment she spotted Susan, she let out a loud, desperate whinny, pulling against the lead rope. Susan didn't hesitate. She walked toward the auction block. The auctioneer faltered mid-sentence, confused and nervous. Susan reached him and took the microphone from his hand. The screech of feedback echoed across the arena. Every head turned toward her. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked straight at Macy. "You stole my mare, Andrew," she said, her voice raw but strong. The room gasped. A few people turned to stare at Macy. He gave a short, forced laugh. "This is unbelievable," he said loudly. "This poor woman is confused. She sold me this mare last night." "No," Susan cut in. "You didn't just steal her. You tied me to a tree in the Badlands. You left me to die." A ripple of shock rolled over the audience. Macy raised his voice. "This is slander. She's desperate. She's losing her ranch. She's making up stories to get attention." Each word fueled Susan's rage, but she stayed steady. "You're not just a thief," she said. "You're a hunter, and you were hunting more than my mare." She lifted the mic higher, speaking slowly so every breeder could hear. "You're after the Xanadu Cross Stallion." Silence. Electric, sharp silence. Breeders leaned forward. The name meant millions. It meant history. It meant a legend thought to be gone forever. Macy's face turned white, then red. "Ridiculous," he snapped. "There is no Xanadu Cross Stallion. Cypher has the brand." The entire arena erupted. People yelled, chairs scraped, buyers surged forward with wide eyes. Macy stepped back, suddenly cornered by the truth Susan had just unleashed. His lips trembled with rage, but his eyes darted to the exits. He was planning to run. And then the back doors slammed open. Sheriff Brody walked in with 2 deputies, badges shining under the lights. They weren't headed for Macy. They were walking toward Marcus "Grit" Ryland, who had been trying to slip out the side door. "Marcus," Brody said, "stop right there." Grit stiffened. He looked at Macy. Macy didn't look back. He didn't lift a finger to help him. And that was all it took. "I'll talk," Grit yelled, his voice shaking. "It was all him. He cut the fence. He tied her up. He told me to do it." Quote. The arena exploded again, this time with outrage. The deputies grabbed Grit. Macy tried to push past the crowd, but Brody caught him by the arm. "Andrew Macy," the sheriff said, "you're under arrest for horse theft, armed assault, and attempted murder." A cheer rose from the crowd as the deputies cuffed both men. Macy's polished world crumbled right there on the sawdust-covered floor. Susan didn't watch them leave. She didn't care anymore. She turned toward the block, toward the mare that had been her last hope. When she walked to Sunfire, the mare pressed her head against Susan's chest and shook with relief. Susan wrapped her arms around her. For the first time in days, she let her tears fall freely. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "In light of these events, this mare is returned to her rightful owner," he announced. Thunderous applause filled the arena. But Susan's story didn't end with justice. 2 days later, her ranch suddenly became the center of national attention. When word spread that Cypher, the wild stallion, was the true Xanadu Cross descendant, breeders from across the country came to her door. They weren't offering pity. They were offering contracts, money, support, staff. Her debt was wiped out in a single meeting. They paid to restore the ranch, rebuild the barns, replace the fences, and fund her future. All they wanted in return were rights to Cypher's future DNA, without ever capturing him, without ever breaking his freedom. Susan agreed, but she made one rule crystal clear. "Cypher stays wild," she said. "He saved me. No one puts a rope on him." And they honored it. 3 months later, Cottonwood Creek Ranch was alive again. Green pastures, fresh fences, a full crew of ranch hands. Sunfire grazed happily in her pasture, healed and calm. Susan rode her along the ridge one evening as the sunlight faded. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She had saved the ranch. She had faced death and survived. Then she looked north, toward the Badlands. On the highest ridge stood Cypher, silent, strong, watching her the way he did the night he saved her life. Susan smiled. Not a tired smile, but a real one, a grateful one. She lifted her hand in a quiet gesture of thanks. Cypher tossed his head, mane flying like a black banner in the wind. Then he turned and disappeared into the canyons, free, powerful, and forever untamed. Susan touched Sunfire's mane. "Let him go," she whispered. "He earned it." And she rode home across land she had nearly lost, with the wild stallion's spirit forever guarding it.